During the 16th century, the interpretation of Magna Carta and the first barons' war shifted. Henry VII took power at the end of the turbulent Wars of the Roses, followed by Henry VIII, and extensive propaganda under both rulers promoted the legitimacy of the regime, the illegitimacy of any sort of rebellion against royal power, and the priority of supporting the crown in its arguments with the papacy. Tudor historians rediscovered the Barnwell chronicler, who was more favourable to King John than other 13th-century texts. And, as historian Ralph Turner describes, they viewed King John in a positive light as a hero struggling against the papacy, showing little sympathy for the Great Charter or the rebel barons. Pro-Catholic demonstrations during the 1536 uprising cited Magna Carta, accusing the king of not giving it sufficient respect. The first mechanically printed edition of Magna Carta was probably the Magna Carta cum aliis Antiquish Statutus of 1508 by Richard Pinson. Although the early printed versions of the 16th century incorrectly attributed the origins of Magna Carta to Henry III and 1225, rather than to John and 1215, and accordingly worked from the later text. An abridged English-language edition was published by John Rastell in 1527. Thomas Berthollet, Pinson's successor as the royal printer during 1530 to 1547, printed an edition of the text along with other ancient statutes in 1531 and 1540. In 1534, George Ferrers published the first unabridged English-language edition of Magna Carta, dividing the Charter into 37 numbered clauses. The mid-16th century funerary monument Sir Rowland Hill of Salton, placed in St. Stephen's Walbrook, included a full statue of the Tudor statesman and judge holding a copy of Magna Carta. Hill was a mercer and a Lord Mayor of London. Both of these statuses were shared with Serlo the mercer, who was a negotiator and enforcer of Magna Carta. The original monument was lost in the Great Fire of London, but it was restated on a 110-foot-tall column on his family's estates in Shropshire. At the end of the 16th century, there was an upsurge in antiquarian interest in England. This work concluded that there was a set of ancient English customs and laws, temporarily overthrown by the Norman invasion of 1066, which had then been recovered in 1215 and recorded in Magna Carta, which in turn gave authority to important 16th-century legal principles. Modern historians note that although this narrative was fundamentally incorrect, many refer to it as a myth. It took on great importance among the legal historians of the time. The antiquarian William Lambarde, for example, published what he believed were the Anglo-Saxon and Norman law codes, tracing the origins of the 16th-century English Parliament back to this period, albeit misinterpreting the dates of many documents concerned. Francis Bacon argued that Clause 39 of Magna Carta was the basis of the 16th-century jury system and judicial processes. Antiquarians Robert Beale, James Morris and Richard Cosin argued that Magna Carta was a statement of liberty and a fundamental supreme law empowering English government. Those who questioned these conclusions, including the Member of Parliament Arthur Hall, faced sanctions.